Greetings. Welcome to another video here on the channel. And today we are going to go over two old men playing the game. Brat versus Risk. And I think this is when Brat came back after a bit of a hiatus. About a month or two ago. And Risk still is a complete rust bag at the game as well. So they've both got very good ideas and both very, very good in their time, but exceptionally rusty. And we'll see how they fare playing against one another. And you've got myself just sitting there in the watching spot, just chuckling away at how bad they both are. And as you can see on this map, a lot of nerfs here. Some are going to get housed, some are going to get eaten, and it looks like, to be honest, Brat's just going to eat them all. He looks like a little bit like an AI right now. He's decided he just wants Bantha for supper here. And there's not really any hunt to go for, so it's not really a bad shout. It'll keep the worker production going. And he's kind of just approaching things in a very different way. He's going for a very early second carbon here as well. So he's kind of just going to eat all the nerfs, build up a good amount of carbon, and then just transition very comfortably into farming. Whereas Risk will probably just have to like keep popping these out. You can see he had 5 before, and now he's popped them on 1 out to eat. So he's just sort of eating these until he can get the farms up, which is kind of the most standard way of playing this. You might end up with like 3 out of 10 here by the time you get like your 4 or 5 farms up. But you got to do what you got to do to make sure that you don't have an idle command center. Because that's your most important goal in the early game, is just to keep building those workers. And to be honest, I feel like my game sounds maybe a little bit too high. I don't want this catching me off guard later when there's like more action and stuff, because the more laser beams that are thrown around, the less you'll be able to hear me. And that used to be a problem back in the day, particularly when it was too difficult to control the game volume, because those sliders used to not work until RVA managed to patch them. So the farms have started to be laid down here. I'll just have a quick wee check here. Note to see both got 20 workers, it's all going well. Nobody's slipped up in that regard. They've just taken very different approaches to it. And Risk, on the other hand, should have these 3 nerfs just taken away for the rest of the game for him. So he's invested a little bit there. But we can see that Brat's got a lot more farms already. Both drop the double carbon. Tons of workers on the carbon just until they can afford more farms, and then people get pulled off because you don't want to have all of those guys on carbon long term. And it's pretty much just going to be Farmville from here on out until they get to sort of a critical mass there, and then they can work out whether they're going to be T3ing or rushing. And Risk already dropping the troop center here. Interesting. I don't know if this is maybe a little bit too early for him here, because he's still got a lot of farms to build. He maybe just feels like he's got a lot of carbon, so he might as well build it now. Rat's got his amount of farms that he's happy with. Risk being a bit annoying with the scout there. Almost forgetting about it. Getting down to half health from the command center garrison fire there. And oh, look at the farm. 14 for Risk. And 12 for Brat here. Now, because Brat got his earlier, I think, because he's had that extra food arrive early, he's quicker up to T2 here. See, Risk is down just about 100 food, despite the fact he has built 2 extra farms, sort of to compensate things here. Brat is just a little bit ahead in the sort of the T2, and getting the troopers sort of built now. Getting the second troop center up. They're both going to arrive at the same spot though. The thing is, when you're ahead, you're going to end up being the aggressor. So how ahead are you? Is it enough that you can get across the map and actually get some damage out of it? That's the real question to answer here. A bit of walling with prefabs here. Just sort of good decisions. making things easier for yourself long term. Limit the movement of enemy troopers, and we can see Brat moving across now with all these troopers. And they kind of got about the same amount of troopers. I think Risk just about to hit T2 now. So, to be fair, Brat's going to be about here. He needs to get his trooper upgrade and his range. The prefab shelter going to save him for like a second there, as Brat paying very good attention to his army, moving back in. But Risk is going to have more troopers here with the defender's advantage, and Brat has had to go very, very wide here to look and try and find some sort of window to do some damage. Fortunately, it's kind of just going to peter out here. But he's maybe hoping that when he goes all the way around here, he either can sneak into the carbon here, Risk maybe just thinks, oh, he's gone, I'm going to counter-attack, etc. Move the army out of position. Because there's no turrets being dropped yet for either player here. Right, finishing off his wall here, he's got a nice little pocket of carbon here that he can mine. You feel good about it. Risk moving his forces down the way, he's searching for this army. He's not really forgotten about it, but Brat's kind of getting behind him here into the enemy lines. He could come into the farms here. And quite a few of these could actually get sniped because of where they're farming. The retreat path is just too long. So that's one worker going to go down here. It's very good to pay attention here, but at the same time, Brat's moved in another control group, and I'm going to have to slow it down because we've got multi-pronged attacks. So Brat hitting the carbon here at the same time that he hits the farms. So just trying to pull apart the army movements here of Risk. And Risk is very good for like just chasing armies down. He doesn't like chase you for a little bit and then let you just reposition. He'll actually chase you down and make you have to keep moving the army around. It can sometimes be a bit of an abusable aspect of his gameplay, but other times it's really frustrating to play against, especially when you're trying to be the aggressor against him. He's just going to run the army down. And he's running it down on two fronts too. And then he'll maybe switch to being the aggressor here. Dropping a war center at home. But on the other hand, no war center as of yet. Third carbon processor. Which maybe wants to do a little bit of walling behind the carb here. And this is completely walking in a... walkable now. I'll just say walkable. I was going to say walking in a bull. That ain't a word, but I was going to make it a word. But no. And Risk gonna move into this position here. He needs to wait for the rest of his forces. Doesn't want to go in with just that. A lot of army here for Risk. He seems very eager to take a trade here with Brat. He hasn't got his war center upgrades just yet. He hasn't even started them. So he's built his war center and he's forgotten to get the +1 armor and +1 damage. Which would probably have some good impact for him here, considering there's just so many troopers now, right? A lot of Gungan on Gungan violence here, and he's going to take this hill. He's going to patrol into this army, and Brat not going to want to take that trade while he's got this buff here. At least maybe let half the army walk off with the hill bonus. He doesn't really need to take the trade when he's at home here, at least not in a compromising his position, but Risk is actually just not paying attention and has just lost an awful lot of troopers there. He's maybe lost a 2-to-1 ratio of what he's killed Brats here. He's got his reinforcements over here. That's replacing about half of what he's lost. Risk is definitely got the map control at the moment. Still slowly building up these prefab walls, closing out parts of the map. I would just say maybe not building enough farms to sort of get him into like T3 position here. You can see there's 3 buildings, but his food is it's all a bit low. And he's never even gotten his war center upgrades. So he's got a lot of carbon. I think he could really just be making like a couple of more farms. Maybe like 2 more farms at a minimum. 2 to 4. I think that would really help the food. He's done a bit of spaceport shenanigans here. But on the other hand, not quite just there yet. At the same time, missing a couple of farms, I think. They're both sitting on about 16. I think you should really be aiming upwards, maybe 18. And closer to 20. But I'm not looking to do a sort of spaceport. Gets T3, he's mined all of his Nova here. He's got a lot of workers on Nova. And he's just holding this position. He's walled. And risk retreating now. He knows he's on his way to T3. Maybe feels he's likely going to be the one that gets it first. And he's going to want to upgrade the troopers, right? He gets the +1 damage. Super important for the troopers, particularly if he's going to go in with heavy troopers. If you're going to be taking on like mechs and stuff, you really need those plus damage upgrades. Got some anti-air troopers, interesting. Opponent's not T3 yet. Maybe he thinks he's going to rely on fighters to deal with him. I can get that portable scanners, the range upgrade for the troopers. And for the heavy troopers as well, maybe doing a little bit of spaceport shenanigans there. Double mech factory, going to be pumping out strike mechs as well to complement the army here. So it'll be very high amounts of anti-trooper damage looking to funnel into this choke. To be honest, I don't even know if I would even go for this choke. I'd probably just kill this wall with the troopers. Go straight into the carbon. Because even if you get into this position, you're not really harassing much. You're just harassing these few farms, and then they can like hold you here, they can hold you here, they can hold you here. The carbon's the most important thing right now. Going into early T3. And risk pushing in now, he's got his heavy troopers, he's got his range, and these strike mechs, you can see it gets shredded down in health. If Risk could just get the he's got a lot of the mech upgrades here. If you get the +2 onto these troopers, it'd be very good as well. You see what I mean when you push in this position, it's very easy to sort of hold you. You can see the strikes are getting a very good arc. He's doing some good damage though, he snipes off 2 of them. But he's not really microing the entire army here. See, I think you just kill a prefab and you walk in, and you can threaten the power core as well. A lot of these units just keep wanting to attack this gate. Really favour hitting these defensive structures. And Brat getting some good trades here. He's got his own heavy troopers now. He's got his +1, he's got his range. And Risk running in with his strikes and just not microing properly. This gate's really mucking him up. I think he's had a very huge lead there, and just because he's attacked into a terrible position. There's a much better fight for him now though. Strikes and the troopers fighting away. Troopers are soaking up a lot of the strike fire. And it looks like it might just come down to a bunch of strikes for both sides left here. Even upgrades. Nobody's really going to want to build troopers anymore. Risk's built a couple, but I can't imagine that continuing. And these strikes running to the back of the base now and just going to go for the workers here. And looking at Brat's base and his economy here, it seems he's a bit hard pressed to actually get that result in terms of defending that attack. And a lot of workers having to garrison around, Mech Destroyer having to be built now. And see all these guys going idle as well. Just really sucks to be on the defensive for this long at the start of T3. Really falling behind. The command center here for a Risk at home. We could just sort of fall back on that and start building up if he wants to. Or if he smells blood in the water here, he can just try and force things and just keep the pressure on. He's still rallying 2 strikes at a time. And again, it's a very high number with decent upgrades where they can actually maybe snipe these Mech Destroyers as well. Hard to get through this choke though. It's always a mystery when you look at that and it's walled. Looks like he's even thinking about just running past the army. No, he's going to go up. He's going to go for the Mech Destroyers. He's clicked on it. A lot of shots being missed because of the movement. He switches to the other one. And can't quite evade it forever. And he's just got too many strikes here for Brat to deal with. And Brat is going to GG and call it there. I believe they're in comms at that point, so it's not that he's being salty by not saying GG. He would have just said GG there. So going into the second game. And from the get-go, we can see there's a lot of Rontos just kicking about. Up to 5, 6 Rontos. So that'll be a lot of food in T1, but no nerfs or banthas or anything like that. And Trade Federation mirror as well, so not really much walling. So we'll see how this plays out here. Speed up a bit. So TNF can't build houses, can't wall out a lot of these chokes, other than using maybe light walls or medium walls. Which light walls not being very strong, medium walls being a bit expensive, being more awkward to have when you're building troopers and farms and eco upgrades. All the workers going to gun down that Ronto. Both players finding their Ronto, no mistakes there. He's all nicely in the same spot. There seems to be a lot of EOPs kicking around. Not going to matter too much in this matchup though when there's so many Rontos. It's just going to be Ronto meat for dinner for quite a while. And players can get an early carbon processor down and just start banking up that carbon because they're not going to have to invest any into the early food economy. Hunt just being so good to have less workers in, but get so much more food. I'm loving his little early double carbon processors that he doesn't really use early. He just likes having them. A double lure here. Intense GBG luring action right now. Repairing the worker. I don't know if it's accidental or he's being a nerd. Making sure his workers have got high health so they don't get harassed. And the first troop centre going down here for Brat. Sort of cutting off a little bit the arc of his carbon here. He is getting that down very early. It will need that as a tech building to click the button to T2. Not really much else to spend the carbon on right now anyway. So it's fine to get it so early. Risk was a bit later on his carbon. There's a lot less workers on it at the moment. You can see Brat's got the double amount. You could say that maybe having these 3 workers go off and build this food processor and then be tasked onto the OPs here is a bit greedy. And that these probably should have been carbon. And this might put him substantially behind Brat here, because you can see that Brat's already built the power core and Risk's just starting his first troop centre. Building it sort of in the back of the base here too. You can see he's got enough to tech up, but he doesn't have his building because he's not started that troop centre. Whereas Brat on the other hand has got his carbon, power core, troop centre, has his 3 buildings. He's almost T2 now. Risk fairly behind. This mistake potentially proving costly. You can see he's got a lot of food as well, doesn't really necessarily need the EOP so soon. You can see the troopers are just ferrying their way, wandering across the map to Risk's location. And maybe should have lured this Ronto because he's going to move over here now, but he's not going to be able to protect the workers because the troopers are going straight for this. You can see that the OPs are getting eaten on the shroud here and they're going to start harassing the workers. Risk's going to try and bash these down to buy some time. Second troop centre only going up now. And oh, what horrible. This is some nonsense right here. I remember this. Not in power, apparently, because of some nonsense with the hills and elevation, but yeah. Visually, it's in power, right? Nope. So he's kind of just snookered here, right? Horrible mishap here. And he's definitely made some mistakes, I would say, getting for this food processor so early in the OPs. Particularly them both being TF, and it's all about getting the fastest rush possible here. But yeah, that sucks, because that just completely hampers his ability to weather the storm here, which it looks like he might have done. He might have been a little bit behind, but I think he would have survived. He could still get his 2 turrets. He did make it to T2, but that is just really sucky. How many more games do we got? So we've got 2 more. Head into this next one. So it's always going to be desert. Desert is the place to be for the 1v1s. We got 2 nerfs. I'll go up to 4 maybe. 2 Rontos. Pretty balanced T1 that. Some right fat AOPs here in the back of the base though for Risk. Now that is a little bit imbalanced. You can see Brats are sort of in between him and his opponent, so forward facing. Could maybe eat those though before the action starts, but this is really nice for Risk. He's going to eat these right off the bat. I would favour eating the Rontos first though. But this will be good to keep the workers fed for some time. Last them straight through the winter. Both players going to be eating their nerfs, it would seem. I think Brat did make a nursery though, because he sees the Rontos. So he's maybe just going to eat one, put the rest into the nursery. And what's nice about that is it just pretty much gives you the tech to go mounties if you want, right? And it's not like a huge amount of food here, so there would be farms, and like the more farms that you'd have to build, the better mounties are going to be if you do them early, because you're sort of cutting your own food income for a bit to put some aggression on your opponent. And if they've had to put in more carbon, that means it's slower for them to hit T2, which means you've got more time to harass them there. And at the same time, if they've got less carbon, having to put it into the economy, they've got less carbon to be building a troop center, power core, and then 3 trooper recruits to push you away from their base. And that's the sort of dynamic for that. And the second Rontos, as Pippin asks, and the early carbon going to be dropped here. I've got late carbon, I don't know why I'm saying early carbon, he's much later behind Brat here. I'm going to be getting the second carbon processor, which would make me think not really going to go for any sort of early mounty shenanigans. Because he couldn't quite get that one round to the Ronto here, so he sent them off to the carbon. Again, Risk is going to be a little bit behind in getting the Rontos eaten, but he is eating all his AOPs. We'll have a quick look just for comparison here. Risk is actually a little bit ahead in the food, but you can see he's a bit behind in the carbon here. And as we start to get closer and closer to like a T2 time, the amount of carbon that you've got is going to become more and more relevant in terms of thinking about like an early rush or something. In this case, going to be a lot of farms though, and this could hold Brat back here a little bit. See how many farms he feels compelled to make. Because Risk's got all these sort of almost unethical AOPs, right? It's so nice them just being right near the command center, but then also at the edge of the map as well. This wouldn't even be a bad place to be like farming later too. So troop center started for Risk here. Again, he feels he can get that earlier because he's just had all these EOPs to munch. So he's saved carbon, theoretically, because Brat is having to drop all these farms. The farms are pretty reliable though. But when we cut back to Brat here, he's a lot of food behind at the moment. It's maps like this and decisions like this that can really catch you off guard when you're a rusty player. Because often with mistakes, they only really happen to you once if you've got a good head on you. And then you keep that memory at the back of your head the next time you're doing the task, and you play around it, right? We're going to have the power core just started here for Risk, definitely ahead of Brat, because Brat, who has not clicked the button to T2 yet. But Risk is still not as ruthless with his rush as Brat was last game, so he's not got like a million troops already across the map. It's a little bit different with the way that the economy has worked in T1 for this one. He's not quite got his second troop centre yet. So maybe if he just favoured a bit earlier carbon, he could have this a bit quicker and he could be like further across the map, I think. Because he has a lot of food right now, so it's maybe been too many workers munching the OPs and Rontos. It could have been more on the carbon earlier. He's dropping some farms now, he's never going to have any problems for his economy. He's had a very smooth transition into everything. But again, he's let Brat get into T2. Oh yeah, something I've not actually caught here. Brat, for like the longest time, has been eating with one worker, just eating this ore here. So he could justify and afford this little wall, the medium wall. And then he'd still be able to get like his turrets and stuff. Which is pretty nice for him because it's just closed out like the entire right hand side of his base. Which is something they might not necessarily have usually when you're playing Trade Federation. So a little tip there, just one worker running back. Same thing that you might do if you were going to go 2 turrets when you were T3ing. You see that Risk finally feels comfortable to move across the map now, but there's about the same amount of troops here for Brat. And Risk sort of maybe just been too focused on setting himself up here, but if we look at his base and we look at Brat's base, his base is so much more open, so he's never going to want to stop being the aggressor here. And he sort of split his troopers up, and he's just running at this big clump of troopers. He's trying to get these other ones round the side, and he must think, well, his TF should be able to get in there, but no, he's done some decent walling here with the light and the medium wall. He's keeping them there just to be annoying, and Brat has felt compelled to maybe just move out and take this hill position here, and maybe see if he can kill off these troopers. And then maybe go for a counter-attack. Risk just splitting everything up, trying to sneak some troopers through, get some vision, find out what's going on here. But he hasn't really been building too much troopers at home either. Don't know if these are idle. They're not idle. Just a lot. Just his army is just so fragmented it looks tiny, I'm assuming. And it's going to feel pretty bad with how like open this area is. These hills as well are pretty harsh, like huge hills. And the army just sneaking past Risk here. Risk reforming his army. It's like he didn't notice it. And Brat is going to run right in here into a very compromising position. It's going to be a moment where you hope you have 2 turrets. He's already killed 3 workers here on the farms. You can start killing off these farms as well, because there's not really an army mustered together that can actually push him out of this position, and he can get very far ahead here. He's going to kill 1 farm. He's going to look to go for the second. And Risk is scrambling to get into position to push him away here, but he even has a hill that he can fall back on, which is really bad sort of map spawn here to defend this position. So when this happens to you, and you've got like a map spawn like this, you never want to be on the defensive. And running into the Nova here is going to split the army up in a very unfavourable way when he tries to take a trade. Doesn't want to have that fight. And Risk going to try and get ahead on the top of the hill here. Both players moving to get the elevation bonus, take less damage, do more damage. Not going to take the trade there as Brat moves away. He knows he has a lot more troops. He maybe wants to bring them together and just try and use the entire control group to smash Risk's army here when he goes back on the aggressive. Risk still not actually built 2 turrets. Put one little wall here though. If he's going to be a crazy guy without turrets, maybe he should drop some sentry posts or something just to see the army ahead of time. Because he's been very defensive right now. Starting to drop the tech buildings. Brat on the other hand is doing much better with his food economy. He's had farms being consistent for a lot longer, but he's also, you know, not lost 2 farms and 3 workers. I think he's just managed everything very well here at home. Good T2 macro, and now he's off onto T3. And he's just going to wait. It's often how it can end up in these sort of higher level games. You know, sometimes like taking like these stupid like trooper trades where you're not really guaranteed to win. It would just be like mutually assured destruction. Both players just feel compelled to keep the troopers at home, get to T3, upgrade them, which both are trying to do here, and Risk is almost closer to clicking that button to go up to T3. I think he's enough behind here where Brat could get some very valuable upgrades and a little bit of a window to exploit them against Risk here. So what we'll be looking for will be like the plus range and the heavy trooper once again, and then the double mech factory just throwing out strike mechs. See, Brat got a ton of carbon and food here. Hiding the strike mechs at the moment. Risk almost T3. So we've got a factor in the walking distance. I think, to be honest, Brat could be out on the map right now. I mean, if Risk ran into his base, he's got a turret out here on the outskirts, he's got decent walling, and he could rely on strikes as well. He's built a gate out this wall, which is nice, going to help the strikes just get straight into the action here. They can move straight across to this hill. But I think the troopers could have been out on the map right now while he's getting his upgrades, which I can't actually see because I'm not in his player camera. But I can see the heavy trooper is halfway there. The range I think is already done. It goes really quickly. Strike Mech is going to scout ahead here, and he can maybe try and pick off some of the troopers here, but he's quick to get these mech destroyers out. If Risk can maybe get the upgrades himself, which he's not, and I think this might be a mistake, he's got so many troopers, I think he could really use just having the extra stats on these, having the extra health. Maybe having like all these units you could put armor on as well from the war center, just to tank up some shots, because these heavy troopers are going to be very good as a differential here, and they're going to help to take away the mech destroyers. Brat rallying some MDs as well. Some anti-air troopers, just in case there were some fighters coming this way. And to be honest, I would think these units are running too far forward, but maybe if my opponent wasn't getting a heavy trooper, maybe I would think that they might be getting an airbase and some fighters as a differential. But some just a little bit of panic miss micro here, I think, from Risk, because these units are walking really far forward. And what really sucks, again, is this massive hill that these units can just walk up the top of. And, you know, their entry point to this is the command center, so they're pressuring all the farms here. And there's not really been like prefab shelters and stuff that could be built on these positions for this more open spawn of the map. Brat can just keep rallying units across the map here and keep the pressure on. He's just starting to rally mech destroyers now. Risk falling further and further behind. Second command center. There's going to be an air base now thrown as a differential 2, which is going to really be hard for us to do. He has got a lot of anti-air troopers, to be fair. Again, I think with all the troopers that he had, if you got heavy trooper, you got the range, he would actually have a bit more of a comparable force to push this away, particularly when Brat overextends, because the troopers have such a good DPS. Now it's kind of really just in Brat's choice what he wants to do here. He could drop more command centers and get more economically ahead, or he could get a lot of ore. And he could get a fortress placed just to sort of solidify this contain, and he could just sit on the fort and then boom behind it. And then maybe drop some artillery and start putting on the pressure with those. Risk going to feel very contained. He does have a lot to play with in terms of resources and stuff. But again, the hill is just such a big issue. I think he's just always going to be at a disadvantage whenever he takes a trade. Some good shots there with the mech destroyers. You can see the power core is going to really signify that he's going to build a shield generator. And maybe even a heavy weapons factory. He's going to drop the heavy weapons factory. I think you could definitely get a shield, and it'd be such a good position to shield, right? Because it hits the command center, and you've got the elevation bonus too. Keeps boxing everything in the same control group, makes it a little bit awkward and wide. I think, to be honest, myself, I think I would probably just keep the troopers in their own control group. compact together, and then the mechs on theirs. Just getting the shield generator now, it's tanking some shots. A lot of MDs getting some good focus fire here for Risk. But again, I think it's the troopers that are just like the huge differential in these fights. You can see them there and they're getting a lot of damage. And when you switch to just building pure mech destroyers, there's not much of a DPS risk when the troopers come surging forward to maybe snipe some units. Because there's not enough strikes, you know, hitting them here. And the artillery as well is going to be too much to deal with here. As they start to build up, they trade really, really well into the mech destroyers. Do get a nice shield here for Risk, but he doesn't have a lot of units to put behind it. And that Nova processor going to be very annoying when his units move from here to here, because they're going to split awkwardly. The artillery just going for the shield generator. Got to half health already here. Brat very paranoid about air, just making things uncomfortable for him. But he's going to have a much, much better economy because he's just not having to garrison workers, lose workers, and pay too much attention to his base as Risk is. You know, he can just do things at home and then just move his camera back and control his army. Whereas Risk's got to constantly wonder, oh, am I losing my army, am I losing my eco? And I'm just going to call GG here as the artillery count gets too high there and Brat taking that game. Interesting what's happened there. You can say that the hill has played a really big part there. I think Risk maybe could have had a much quicker rush there with the nonsense EOPs he had as a sort of a trade-off from the map there. I'm going to the last game now. L Rebels and Naboo. Is this Jort? Oh. Oh well, we'll have a bonus Jort versus Brat game here. I can't remember if I've done this before. I know I've watched it a bunch of times. I've started it, I might as well do it. Right, in terms of the map here, 8 nerfs, a couple of dewbacks. Or is it just 1 dewback? No, it's 3 dewbacks and a bunch of nerfs. So Brat in the Naboo, Jort here in the Rebels blue. And kind of open at the top of the base here. Carbon's nice and close though for both players. So it'll be a decent T1, a lot of food to get the nurseries down. Mounties will definitely be an open factor here for the players to do. Chuck in his carbon early here. Only a few workers here in the hunt. He's got his nursery. I could say he's maybe going to go for Mounties. Looking at that. Brat has a lot more workers on his hunt at the moment. So you can really see one player favouring a lot of food early, the other favouring a lot of carbon early. Which if you had your scout there, you might see that and it might give you an incline into what is maybe possible. And it should always be at the back of your head anyway, since they've got a nursery full of nerfs. Which means Mountie Tech is unlocked when the nursery is built. Brat pulling over another cheeky dewback here. Getting his early second carbon processor. The troop centre already about to finish here for Jort. Running off his last dewback. Markers on these dewbacks at the moment. That'll be looking to farm after this. There's just so much food that you can go T2 as well. I think I just tried to go for quite early mounties. I suppose he's made it a bit more balanced. He put a lot back on the food rather than get the power core up so quickly. But there is still a window here to do damage with the mounted troopers. Is the power core just going up now? So it could be more like you build a couple of mounties and then you just go for your normal troopers. Use the mounties to scout, get some damage and some control. You're starting a trooper recruit here. Right, a little bit behind in that regard here. Rebels could be at a very good advantage here when they actually start farming, because they've got that huge farm bonus where they've got the increased carry amount. And the Mountie is not going straight in here and doing some damage, which seems like a little bit of a mistake because he's got a window to do so right now. There's no troopers out or anything like that. But I think T2, but these Mounties, they're going to go this way and then they decided to go the other way here, so they've just lost a lot more time. I think he could have got some damage with these. His base is going to feel quite nice, even though it's a bit open out here at the front. He's sort of walled off from the edge, the carbon. I could maybe close it out again at the edge here. The advantage of being on the edge of the map. There's already troopers out here as the Mounties actually finally get in to do some damage here. And Brat going to clean them up quite comfortably now. He's dropped 2 turrets just to be safe here. Maybe he doesn't like that he's got like a sort of a forward facing carbon at the moment. Maybe feels like after seeing Mounties and stuff he just wants to go straight on the offensive here. Thinks he might be at a lead here with his troopers. Jort built up a couple of troopers here, dropping some farms. Farm's going to be quite safe in this sort of pocket. Brat now halfway across the map. Them is going to collide. They are absolutely not, because Brat's taking a different path here. So now they're going to see one another. But Brat got some good walling at the front here. He's got his double turrets. He's going to feel quite safe if some troopers come in, and it's not a huge amount. And he's actually pulling back, and I don't know why. Maybe it just feels like he might just lose them. It's taking him too long to get across the map. It's a bit of idle troop centres here at the moment. Not a huge amount to actually defend. And these 5 troopers are going to get in here and going to catch this worker who's trying to close things out from the edge of the map here. They're going to snipe him, so that's 1 worker kill. And these guys who've been a bit indecisive walking back and forth are now coming again to pressure here. And 2 workers going to go down there. And I think he could have gotten more because it looks like Jort just didn't really react. Pull the workers away. Trying to get in with these troopers, but if he goes this side it's certain death, and there's a lot of troopers built up here. Brat done very well, just macroing here. Making sure that he's always building troopers from the troop centres. Jort just seems to be a little bit uncomfortable in this game at the moment. Not quite building as many troopers as he wants. If anything, it looks like he's maybe just trying to cut some corners. He's gotten a lot of farms up and he knows he's rebels, and maybe he's trying to just get to T3 first. He feels that that's where he's got his best chance in this matchup. Brat trying to close things out here a little bit as well, and use these cliffs just to elongate how long it takes to get into his sort of territory. Again, you can just see that there's never really much of an attempt to move the troopers out. These guys are missing, and Brat has actually sneaked across the map because he's the same colour as these bloody Novas. Going into the back of the carbon here. I'm pretty sure there's a gap in this wall. And Jort should be counting his lucky stars that Brat's not actually walked through it. I think it's between these 2 houses. Because if this army walked into the carbon, it's probably GG. Because the turrets don't even completely cover it. They only cover this area. Like as a triangle. So like half the carbon is completely just guttable. And Jort actually moving out across the map. I don't know if I really like this from the way that he's played this, because he's never really built up like a huge amount of troopers. It's taken him a while to get to this position. He built a lot of farms and stuff. I think he was favouring trying to get like early T3, and I think he maybe should have just played it that way, played defensive. Because now that he's moving out in the map. Brat is a little bit out of position. He did pull his troopers back, but Jort's not getting into a compromising position as of yet. He's going up and favouring the hill. I think he maybe should have just ran these forces down, because he's let them meet up with the main group here, the main army. And now Brat can get into a position ahead of Jort here and stop Jort getting into his economy. Jort can use the hill though. Not really patrolling too much then. A lot of these units are actually at half health here. And Brat just keeping forward and cutting through the army here, and it's just sort of a bad trade for Jort here. I think he could have microed that a lot better. And again, he's sort of thrown away the troopers now, but you can see what he's trying to do. He's dropping the spaceport, he's got the war centre down. It's only 21 minutes and you know he's looking to go T3. But on the other hand, not quite there just yet. Maybe another couple minutes I think. And that's actually a better trade than will ever be for him, because he's got 1/3 to maybe half of the army Brat has here. Brat wasn't on patrol. So he's actually killed off a lot of those troopers, but again these troopers are going to come forward here and look to get into his base and do some damage. Jort should be on his way to T3 now. Just about 1/3 of the way there. Brat hitting it now. The point is that he's not really achieved much, and it might have been better to just keep the troopers together and get the upgrades later when he hits T3 first, which we've seen in the previous games. Now he's just sort of boxed in here. There's going to be some important differentials to consider. Because he's boxed in, he's you can see there's a hole. He's not got access to Nova, so if he wanted to get some fighters or some air, he's going to be a little bit harder pressed to do so. He's not going to have access to ore. If he wanted to get some anti-air turrets and stuff, because remember we've dropped 250 on these turrets. Being rebels as well, he could have very good access to speeders and things like that. Brat just about to hit T3 now. He's not actually got a mech factory up yet, even though he's hit T3. So these troopers are going to come in here and going to catch the workers at the Nova and the couple of troopers that were defending it. But there's no strike mechs actually out onto the field yet. Dropping an airbase here, so it's one airbase, one mech factory. Seems a little bit less than what you would usually see in a 1v1 here. Normally it's double like mech factory, but see Brat, he's going to go for double airbase. He maybe thinks he never wants to like super commit onto going for like mechs here. Maybe his opponent was going to try and cheese out like getting a fortress and get some speeders, and speeders are so good. These troopers are actually walking past these strike mechs. Strike mechs not paying too much attention here. They're trying to finish off this wall, which I still don't know if this is completely walled. It's such an awkward hill this. These troopers are going to sit behind the carbon and they can actually reach a couple of the workers here, which is super annoying. Strike mech going to have to come up and deal with that. Brat never actually finished this wall that it looks like he was aiming for here around the ore, and these strikes are going to get straight behind the carbon, which is going to be super difficult for him to deal with. He does have these double air bases ticking away, and there's only one air base here for Jort, which means at some point there's going to be huge critical mass of fighters and not a lot from Jort here, and Jort is actually moving across the map with his fighters. You can see there's 4 here, 4 to 1. Lucky that they didn't even go for him here. They're going to catch the second one though. They're going to make the same mistake. Jort does get his command center built up here between the Nova. Super important to grab those up here. And he's almost going to lose this fighter. It almost looks like it could have been spawn killed there by Rat. He's got some anti-air troopers they're going to try and rely on here, but it's not enough. Especially when there's 4 fighters already up and they're trading really well to kill off the fighter. He loses only 1. And they're going to get onto the workers here on the carbon and start killing an awful lot of them. They kill them very quickly. At the same time, the strike mechs are not really doing too much. He's moved the workers away from this carbon. He started another carbon out in the back here. Requires less time and micro from him to defend. But nothing really here to push away these fighters. As these anti-air troopers do trying to get in. And it looks like maybe he did complete the wall here, because they're having some problems with the SimCity of the base. Nope, there is still a gap. And they're coming through. He does get a heavy anti-air trooper upgrade, but looking at the workers here, he did lose the strike mechs to try and get to that new carbon. So it's 42 to 21 workers. Just too many workers have died. But remember, there's a few workers that died in the early trooper shenanigans. There was a few that died in the start of T3 here as well. And then a lot have died at the carbon with the fighters there. You can see their corpses scattered across here on the hill. So Brat is just going to be super ahead now. And he's got this air dominance where he can fly around. And Jort still doesn't have access to ore. Like any ore that he's getting right now, he's having to spaceport for. Which means he's putting himself even further behind because he's taking a bad resource trade. He's losing like 25% each time on each trade. And I think the fact he only went one met fight, he would have been better to just go double airbase himself, I think. If he played a bit more defense, if he kept his troopers, he could have kept control of his Novas here. That's maybe something that you should think about in these games. You know, start thinking about the next tech and what you're going to need to do whatever strategy you're going to do. Because you can see how impactful losing this position early was. And how it's ended up in a huge air deficit for Jort here. Where Brat can just terrorise him with the fighters. And not much lag in these 1v1s either, so you can micro the fighters very well around turrets. Turrets are just a deterrent, not a counter. Some good strike micro harassment coming in here, killing off a couple of workers, but a lot of mech destroyers here for Brat, which are just chasing these down. And it looks like he's actually just sending his mech destroyers to the Nova and cutting the Nova off completely. See, there's a lot of workers on it. Jort, I think, feels compelled to actually have his own fighters. He's trying to get a second air base here. He's got all these workers on the Nova, but this mech destroyer has just been killing off a few of them, being really annoying here. And now forcing them all to garrison and cutting off all income from this position. Here's some mounties being built as well. The Nova police inbound. Enemy spotted. And the fortress is going to drop here, so Brat just being so far ahead, he's going to keep the pressure on by using his units to secure this position in the map, and then he's going to build the fortress here, and the fortress is going to threaten the Nova, it's going to threaten the ore, and that's really going to spell disaster here for Jort and probably GG, because you can't lose all these important resources, especially as a civ like Rebels, where you really need the Nova to make the kind of units that are important for your faction. This is not a sustainable amount of land for T3. Carbon's going to run out very quickly. He tries to push him off this position, but again, there's so many fighters here following about. And even with the turret trying to help out, he's going to call GG there, and that's going to be the end of it. And they're going to finish things off there, so thank you all for tuning in. As always, if you like the content, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like on the video, leaving a comment. It really helps the channel grow. If you want to support me in a different way, you can find the PayPal link down below if you want to buy me a coffee. Oh yeah, and again, if you want to join our GBG Discord, where we keep our community, we play all our games on foodbleed.com, but we hang about in the Discord just because it's such a dead game. We need to get in touch with one another and make sure that we all know that a game's happening. You can find the invite link down below there as well. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, bye bye.